Lately, I've been making a lot of YouTube shorts and Instagram reels on harmonic warm-ups, like a lot. Here's a killing harmonic warm-up. Check out this beautiful hinging exercise. Check out this awesome spread voicing warm-up. Check out this first chord warm-up. Here's a killing oblique harmonic warm-up. Here's a beautiful sugar chords warm-up using a very simple chord progression. Check out this great voice leading warm-up. Here's a killing tritone sub warm-up. Key of C. Here's the infinite Steely Dan warm-up. I've gotten a lot of great feedback on these, but people have asked if I could go a little bit deeper and do a long-form video explaining this concept, which is why today, all we're doing is practicing harmony. My name is Adam Maness. This video is sponsored by Open Studio. Go to openstudiojazz.com for a deeper dive. I have a whole course called Hearing Great Harmony that deals with a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. If this is your first time here, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, there is a PDF for this session. You're going to want to get that because it has everything that we're working on in more detail, and you can find that in the description. So just a fair warning that this is kind of a jargony lesson, and I'm going to do my best to make clear what all of these things mean. We're going to start by talking about the voicing structures we use. The three most common types we use for these harmonic warm-ups are drop 2, drop 3, and the mu major. We're going to talk about what those are and the differences between them and why we use all three of those. Then we're going to talk about diatonic seventh chords. Diatonic sevenths are the meat and potatoes of harmony. They're like 80% of what most of the tunes we're playing are made up of. Diatonic sevenths or diatonic triads, but in jazz we play a lot of diatonic sevenths. Then we're going to talk about secondary dominants and their role. We're specifically going to go over how we can use them to create more tension and do something called tonicization, which is super important as we're practicing harmony. It helps us understand the function and role of the chords that we might see on the page. Then we're going to go a layer deeper and talk about secondary 2/5s. One of them isn't even a 2/5 at all. It's just a beautiful modern sound using that mu major, and I think you're really going to like that. Stick around for the end for all of that. Okay, the first thing we want to talk about are the three voicing structures. As I said, it's drop 2, drop 3, and the mu major chord, and all three of these are absolutely beautiful and super useful because it helps to get some really cool voice leading that we can use as we're working on our harmony. I just want to talk about the differences between them and why we might use them. The drop 2 is sort of the most common voicing structure you might see, not just for piano, but for guitar and vibes as well. It's actually a very simple concept. If we have any structure, 4-note structure, like here's just a C7, C, E, G, and B flat. We take the second note from the top and we drop it down an octave. That's really it. Some people are confused. Well, shouldn't you take the second note in the scale or the second note in the chord? No, it's always just the second note of the top. We take down an octave. So if this were a different inversion, say this, right? Instead of this, if this were this, drop 2 of this would be we take the second note from the top and put it down. If we were to do another version, the second note from the top and we put it down. It just keeps going like that for any inversion. It doesn't matter what the degree in the scale is of the chord. It's literally the structure of it from the top down. Drop 3, as you can imagine, is the exact same concept, but we take the third note from the top, in this case the E, and we drop it down an octave. This is a bit of a wider structure. As you can see, it's got a bigger spread here between the bottom and top notes. It really is beautiful for contrary motion, as we'll find out. Now, the mu major is a very fun, very tricky little chord. So it's called the mu. No one really knows why. It's apparently Steely Dan, the band, came up with it. It's an add 2 over the third in the bass. There's the mu major, there's the mu minor. We're only going to be using mu major today. So we just have mu there. We're just going to call it the mu. It's also actually a somewhat of a drop 2, or there's different ways we can do this. So it's just a C add 2. Some people would say that's a C add 9. I wouldn't disagree with them, but for the case of the 2 and the mu, we're just going to rhyme it. C add 2. It's just a C triad with that second there. And we take the third, which is the degree of the scale, not the drop 2, and we drop it down. So it's always over the third, right? So C major, a C mu is always over C major mu, C mu major. See, I'm already confused. C mu major is always over an E. A C mu minor would be over E flat, but it's just that. And it really is all that. You can do different inversions on the top notes, but the third is always in the bass. So that's the mu. A little confusing next to the drop 2 and drop 3, but that's what it is. It's that simple, honestly. Okay, now one of the most important things about these harmonic warm-ups, and really with just using these voicings to practice hearing harmony, playing harmony, practice our voicings, are the diatonic seventh chords. As I said, these make up so much of the tunes we play. If we're in the key of C, if we're playing a song in the key of C, most of the chords that we're going to see are one of these 7 seventh chords, right? It's just chords based off of the C major scale. C major 7 is the 1, D minor 7 is the 2 chord, E minor 7 is the 3, F major 7 is the 4 chord, G7 is the 5, A minor 7 is the 6 chord, also called the relative minor, B minor 7 is the 7th, and C major 7, now we're back at the tonic, also called the root, also called the 1. Diatonic seventh chords are everywhere. You can't avoid them. And when you're able to recognize them in the tune by saying, okay, what key am I in? I'm in the key of C. Where are my diatonic seventh chords? We know that they're all built off of the key. And with that in mind, we know that we can easily build our voicings and that they're important landmarks in the song. What we want to talk about next is how we can use this structure of diatonic seventh chords up the scale to practice things like secondary dominants and secondary 2/5 because they're so important. And knowing how to get to these diatonic seventh chords via secondary dominants is so important for how we can get good voice leading and how we can move around any tune that we're playing. So that brings us to secondary dominants. Now, a secondary dominant is just any dominant chord that's not part of the key. Every key has one dominant chord. In the key of C, it's G7. It's the 5 chord. What we can do here is something called tonicization. That's where we can make any chord a temporary tonic by adding its dominant chord. So we just add a dominant 7th chord from a 5th above or 4th below any chord, and it sounds for just a moment like a tonic because you're adding some tension and release to that. Now we're going to do that to all of our diatonic 7th chords. So all of those 7th chords that are in the key of C, we are going to give them their own secondary dominant chord to just briefly make it seem like they're more important than they actually are. But this is a common thing that is in most compositions, and it's great to have these little avenues to get there. Secondary dominants, they're like a pathway that lead to important landmarks, right? So they're all over music, and knowing how to deal with them, expecting a D minor 7 after an A7 is crucial for us to be able to fundamentally get some great voice leading in here. So here we're going to the 2 chord in the key of C, D minor 7. We're going to use that A7. Notice the one important thing about the secondary dominant, that C sharp is not in the key of C, right? That C sharp, it makes D minor kind of more of a home sound, right? That C sharp is more in the key of D minor than it is in the key of C major. So it takes us out of C major for a little bit. It adds just a little bit of tension before we release it there on the D minor 7, which of course is a diatonic 7th chord. It feels more like home, more in the key of C. And so that's really of all of these warm-ups, that's really what we're doing, is we're tonicizing diatonic 7th chords. We're just working in a key and we're figuring out these little pathways, right? These little veins into these important chords. It sounds better coming from music than it does coming from my face. So let's check it out. So we started off by playing those diatonic 7th chords in the key of C, right? The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have the same thing here. We have the 1, C major 7, the 2, D minor 7, the 3, E minor 7, the 4, F major 7, the 5, G7, the 6, A minor 7, and we have secondary dominants between each one of these. So each one of these gets their own dominant. Now you might notice we do not have the 7th degree, B minor 7 flat 5. In the shorts, I say that the 7th kind of sucks, but really it's just not convenient. It doesn't fit with these others as far as tonicization goes. It's kind of its own little special rules. It's kind of a pain in the butt for this. So we're just going to ignore it for now and work with what we have 1 through 6. But notice here, we have our 1. And then going to the 2, we're going to put a secondary dominant in root position. A7 going to D minor, right? Just takes it to the key of D minor just briefly. Going to the 3 chord, E minor 7, B7. We hit the 3. Going to the 4 chord, we do its secondary dominant, C7. Now C7 is a C chord in the key of C. Isn't that diatonic? No, it's got that B flat, which is not in the key of C. It is a secondary dominant going to the 4, F major 7, D7 to G7, E7, which is G7 is the 5 chord, E7 to A minor 7, which is the 6, and then G7 back home. Skip the 7 because the 7 kind of sucks, and then G7 back home. Let's play this together. I'm going to put a little metronome on. Really easy, nice and light. Just we're really hearing this more than anything. 2, 3, 4. That's just music theory in practice. That's how we can practice this harmony in such a beautiful way. This is just the beginning, though. That's literally just to hear it. When we really want to pour gas on this fire, some voice leading starts to appear. We start to use our different voicing structures. Remember, we talked about drop 2. Imagine if we had our secondary dominants. Here's our A7 with the 5th on the top, but we used a drop 2 structure, taking that C sharp down. This gives us some chromaticism in our lowest note. This gives us a game-changing voice leading exercise using that same diatonic 7th chords with a secondary dominant for each one in between. Check this out. 3 and. So beautiful. All of a sudden, skip the 7th. All of a sudden, this nerdy music theory harmony exercise sounds friggin' gorgeous. Let's do it again. 2, 3, and. And it's so useful. As I said, these secondary dominant chords are used all the time by songwriters and composers as a pathway to these important diatonic 7th chords. Gorgeous. So there's our drop 2 using secondary dominants going to diatonic 7th chords. What about drop 3? We talked about that. What if our secondary dominants were in a root position here, had the 7th on top, and we use drop 3, again, to keep that chromatic motion in the lowest voice, but it's a different voicing structure. So instead of drop 2, which is this, sort of move all of that up in inversion. Check this out. You're going to love this. 2, 3, and. How beautiful is that? Let's do it again. 2, 3, and. Again, what we're doing here is really practicing a key. We're practicing the key of C. We're practicing all of the diatonic 7th chords, these big landmark pillar chords that we use in every song. And we're practicing those pathways that get there, the secondary dominants. We're doing them in these really lovely voicing structures that gives us all of this beautiful voice leading. It is the foundation of music. It is the foundation of great harmony. Let's go on to the mu chord for a little bit more of a modern sound. Same concept here, but we're going to use this mu major, and it's not a dominant chord, but it gives us the effect of a dominant chord in that it leads with a bunch of great voice leading into our diatonic 7th chords. So check it out, right? This is the A mu major, right? Take that C sharp, which is the 3rd of the chord, and drop it down an octave. We get that exact same chromatic movement in the left hand, in the lowest note. Ooh, I've got one inharmonic misspelling there. Please don't arrest me, music theory police. That E flat should be a D sharp. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, and. Gorgeous. So beautiful. Let's do it. 2, 3, and. It's such a brilliant way, a shiny way to approach any diatonic 7th chord from the mu below. So beautiful. Gorgeous. Couldn't be more beautiful. Okay, so that's our diatonic 7th chords with our 3 voicing structures, drop 2, drop 3, and the mu major. We even used just regular old root position voicings to explain it. Now, we're talking about tonicization, right? Where we can sort of tonicize each one of these diatonic 7th chords using the secondary dominant. We can actually go a step further. That is a step backwards. I'm talking about adding a 2 chord to the secondary dominant. So if the secondary dominant, if A7 is the 5 of D minor 7, we can put the 2 of that D minor 7 right before and get a little 2, 5, 1 for each of these new tonics, right? So for D minor 7, if we're going to D minor 7, we would just go secondary dominant to D minor 7. And by the way, this isn't in any of the shorts I've done. This is a real deep dive into how we can get beautiful sounds out of this. Listen to this. We're going to add even more tension. We're going to go back a step before the secondary dominant and give what's essentially a subdominant chord. Subdominant means the chord that's approaching the dominant, that sets up the dominant. We can approach those dominants with a subdominant, in this case a 2 chord, and land on a diatonic 7th chord. We can do it all the way up. How often do you hear sounds like this? I mean, this is part of how we make music, is we basically delay all of this resolution using these tools like subdominants, dominants, secondary dominants. So now this is basically a secondary 2-5, right? It's a 2-5-1 that tonicizes each one of these diatonic 7th chords. Let's give it a try. 2, 3, and. Now, one thing to note on this is that if your target chord, right, if the chord that we're tonicizing here, so if the D minor 7, if it's a minor chord, I'm using a minor 7 flat 5 as the 2 chord. If it's a major chord or a dominant chord, if it has a major third, I'm using just a regular minor 7. And that's because if we were in the key of D minor, right, the 2 chord would be an E minor 7 flat 5. If we were in the key of A minor, the 2 chord is, we're in the key of A minor, we're in the key of C. The 2 chord is a B minor 7. If we're in the key, however, of F, the 2 chord would be a G minor 7, right? So we're kind of using some similar rules. The G7 is a little weird because it's a dominant chord and there's no real dominant key, but you get the idea that it has a major third. So it actually doesn't matter. You could do an E minor 7 if you are an E, just a regular E minor 7, going to the D minor 7. That would be fine, but I like this because it even more sets up the new tonic, quote unquote, of our D minor 7. So that's root position. We can now take it through our other voicing structures. Check it out. Drop 2, what does this sound like? 2, 3, and. Here's where the voice leading comes in. This is so gorgeous. Again, that tonicization of each one of these. Now, you see here how this is drop 2. If we have our E minor 7, we have that E minor 7 flat 5. We have it in this inversion with the E on top. And it would be like we were going into the A7. We just take the second note from the top, the D, we drop it down, and we get this beautiful voice leading. So this becomes this. Gorgeous, right? It's just a little bit more of a spread. Let's do this one more time. It's so pretty. 2, 3, and. Just beautiful, just gorgeous. Let's move on to our drop 3 version of this. So it's the same thing. The tonics are all the same. So the diatonic 7th chords have remained the same this whole time, just with a third on top. And these are just ways of getting around that. The drop 3 is 100% gorgeous. So it would be as if it were all close voicings. It would be with the G on top here on the E minor 7 flat 5, the G on top on the A7. So here's all the close voicings. With drop 3, the third note from the bottom, again, we're just getting this chromaticism. It's a little melody that's happening at the bottom. Listen to this. listen to this. Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it's just the most gorgeous sound you can get. This, of course, is so prevalent in choral writing and church music all over the place. Bach, I mean, whatever. It's been around forever. It's just so much fun to actually work on this in a systemic way so that we can really try to get it into our piano playing, our guitar playing, our vibes playing, mallets playing, whatever it is you're working on, your accordion playing. Hey, I'm not judging. You got to get some harmony going here. Let's try this. 2, 3, and... Do not sleep on drop 3. I think drop 3 is underrated. It is so beautiful. I get people that say like, well, I don't like drop 3 because it sounds too spread. No, it doesn't sound too spread out. It sounds so gorgeous. Okay, there's one more that I want to talk about, and we're going to do something a little different. So here's the mu major. We're going to add a subdominant. Remember, a subdominant just means the chord preceding the dominant chord, and it could be a number of things. And in fact, the most common subdominant chord is not a 2 like a 2-5. It's a 4 like a 4-5-1. You might recognize that from a million songs. And it's kind of what we're going to do here as we approach our tonics. We're going to do a little 4-5-1 action. We're going to do it just all major because we want a kind of a modern, slick, modal-ish sound. Listen to this. If we add a subdominant or a quote unquote 4 chord, you know, it's all in mini quotes with this at this point. Check this out. What? Right? That's it. That's it. Good night. See you folks. No, let's try it. Isn't that beautiful? So we're literally here, before you start playing it, you know, here we have our 5 chord, the A mu major over C sharp, right? The A2 over C sharp. It's acting as a dominant chord going to D minor. We're going to add the 4 chord just before it. So 4 in the key of D minor. I mean, it would be G minor, but that's what I'm saying. It's just, we're just using this slick major, major, minor thing here. So it'll walk up. Same thing here. A little 4 chord, A, an A chord. A B flat, C. These are all root position, but in the mu, it gives us this beautiful voice leader. Isn't that gorgeous? Let's try it. 1, 2, 3, and. Inflection. The mu major for the win. I'm sorry, but it's so beautiful and it's so much fun. So practicing approaching these diatonic 7th chords, it just doesn't get much better than that, does it? It's just so beautiful. Hey, thanks again, everybody, for being here. Don't forget to download that PDF. And then, you know, also don't forget to give us an old like and subscribe. We're here doing this all the time at Open Studio, and I appreciate you watching today. Till next time, happy practicing.